Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallama ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. Allahumma 'allimna ma yanfa'una wa nafa'na bima tu'allimna wa zidna min fadlika ilman wa ta'liman innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. Rabbana atina min ladunka rahmatan wa hayyi lana min amrina rashada. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي امري واحلل عقدة من لساني علما ربي والنافع ربي زدنا علما. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, we're starting our session 7 and we're on the 12th fast of Ramadan, and as you know that these middle 10 days are the days of forgiveness, so we should be doing lots of astaghfar right now. And we have been looking at the beginning surahs of the Qur'an so far. So today we're going to do Surah Maidah, which is the 5th surah of the Qur'an, and it's also one of the long surahs. It has 120 verses. And Al-Ma'idah means the table, or the tables spread with food. So as you can imagine from the title, it's going to talk about food. Food is mentioned in this surah, but that's not what, the only thing that's been mentioned, as with the other surahs. But this is a theme, and behind the theme is really Allah's law and judgment, hukmullah. So how Allah gives His laws, hukam, in the Quran, and what His laws are, and how we have to abide by Allah's laws, and the God consciousness, the taqwa that we should employ when we abide by Allah's laws. So that is the theme that running under this whole surah. Now, the topics that it covers are which animals are forbidden. In a lot of detail, you'll see, and we're going to read them so that we can understand how Allah's laws are developed. And then it talks about, because these surahs, again, Medina surahs, and we've been looking at context of how Prophet ﷺ is dealing with these people, Bani Israel, the children of Israel, and he's dealing with their laws, and they're coming into Islam, and he's teaching them. So a lot of the theme is similar to what we've done in Surah Al Imran and Baqarah. But the underlying, as you saw in Surah Al Baqarah, it was all about Iman. Al Imran concentrated on Islam, except the deen. And Surah Nisa was about justice, Allah's justice. And then now this surah is talking about the laws of Allah. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. And we're going to look at the laws of our dietary laws, our food laws in the Quran. And then, inshallah, if there's time, we're going to have a small discussion on modern food, which, as you know, is a huge topic. But we'll just touch on a few things, inshallah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us these laws, and He's going to tell us in the same surah in verse 6. He says, Allah does not intend to make difficulty for you, but He intends to purify you and complete the favor upon you, that you may be grateful. So why does Allah give us so many laws? Because sometimes you might think, well, I can't eat this and I can't eat that. But Allah, in His wisdom and His rahmah for us, has made everything very clear, so that we go for the very purest of foods. And we know that foods affect us on so many levels. It affects us mentally, physically, spiritually, and it affects us down to a cellular level. Like every cell is affected by the food that we eat. Almost immediately, when the food digests, the cells are affected by it. So food is very, very powerful in our lives. So why would Allah leave that out and let us choose, or let us go wherever we wanted to and graze from wherever we wanted to? Because if we wanted to eat anything, then we'd eat bats too. And look what happens when you eat bats, right? Or other foods like that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this verse is saying, Allah does not intend to make difficulty for you. These laws are not there so that it becomes difficult, but they are there so that you can He intends to purify you, so that He can make it purer, and complete His favor upon you. Remember, Islam is the last religion that came, and it completed all the other religions and laws that came before. So Allah is completing even our dietary laws. So that's a favor upon the last ummah, and we are the last ummah, and so that you may be grateful. So let's start looking at the verses. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu awfu bil uqud. First, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts this verse. He says, "O believers, fulfill your pledges." So first, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, this is a law, that when you make a pledge, whether it's to people or to Allah, then fulfill that. Pledge is a promise. So if you promise to do something, then fulfill it. أحلت لكم بهيمة الأنعام إلا ما يتلى عليكم غير محل الصيد وأنتم حرم. So it's permitted for you the four-legged animals, four-legged beasts, what has been recited to you, game being unlawful when you are in ihram. So there's two laws here. One is that Allah says that you can eat four-legged animals that we have told you that you can eat, right? Because there's a lot of four-legged animals. There's wild beasts that are four-legged as well. So which ones can we eat and which one can't we eat? That's what we're going to look at today. So Allah is starting the discussion like this. He's saying that we have made halal for you the four-legged beasts, which we will mention. And the second law here is that that game meaning hunting, is not permissible for you when you are in ihram, right? So we're working on two levels here. So we're talking about ihram, and ihram is the one which you wear when you go for Hajj and Umrah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that when you're in ihram, then you are not allowed to hunt. And inna Allah yahkumu ma yurid, and Allah ordains what He wills. That means Allah can give the hukam of what He wants. His laws are how He intends. Yurid means an intention or a willing. So Allah's laws are how He intends them to be. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تحلوا شعائر الله ولا الشهر الحرام. So then Allah says, O believers, so He's addressing the believers, do not legalize Allah's signs. Sha'airullah means the signs of Allah. When you go for Hajj and Umrah, then there are the signs of Allah, and He explains it further. Here, signs of Allah really means that in those days they used to take the animals with them, and they would put garlands around those animals. So they were a sign that these people were going for Hajj, or they were going to sacrifice them in the Hajj when they went there. So these were known as these were known as this sha'air, one of the sha'air. Wala shahr al-haram, and nor the sacred months. There were 4 months in which they were not allowed to do battle. So Allah says, do not violate those. Wala al-hadiya wala al-qala'id, and nor the hadi, or the garlanded, the sacrificial animals, or the garlanded animals. Wala amin al-bayt al-haram, and nor those proceeding towards the sacred house. That means those people who are going for Hajj and Umrah, and they remember in those days the journeys were so long. Sometimes it would take months for them to travel from their hometown to go for the Hajj, and the journey would be filled with peril. Sometimes they would go through deserts or wastelands. Sometimes they would go through cities, and sometimes there are bandits waiting for them. So this law came down to protect those people who are proceeding onto the house of Allah. And so he says, nor those proceeding towards this sacred house, seeking the bounty from their Lord and His pleasure. So when you, then it says, وَإِذَا حَلَلْتُمْ, and when you emerge from the state of ihram, then hunt, and never let enmity of a nation who prevented you from the Masjid al-Haram provoke you to transgress. Now this is going to another part where he's saying that those people who stopped the Prophet ﷺ going for Umrah, remember he went for the Umrah and the people stopped him, so they had to come all the way back to Medina, and then they went back the next year, right? That's the story in the Seerah. And so it says, even if you have enmity towards a nation, then who prevented you from the Masjid al-Haram, don't transgress against them, because this is my law. Allah is saying, this is my law. Whether you understand it or you don't, this is my law. And assist each other in goodness and piety, right? وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. Help each other with goodness and piety. and do not help each other with sin and transgression. So help each other in good things and don't help each other in bad things. Wattaqullah, and fear Allah. Inna Allah shadidul iqab, and Allah is most severe in punishment. So these are the first two opening verses of Surah Al-Ma'idah. And you can see from here that we're already starting the laws of the animals, which animals we're allowed to eat, and also the laws of when people go for Hajj and Umrah, and what they're allowed to do there and what they're not allowed to do there. So why were these verses revealed? So there's a story about the Prophet ﷺ, and it says that Sayyidina Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrated that Shurayh ibn Dhahib, Dhahbiya Kindi came to Medina from Yamama. So a man came from Yamama. He instructed his companions to wait outside Medina while he proceeded alone to meet the Prophet ﷺ. So this man, Shurayh, he came alone and he asked his people to wait outside Medina. He asked the Prophet ﷺ what he preached. The Holy Prophet ﷺ said that he preached La ilaha illallah, establishment of salah and the payment of zakah. So he gave him dawah, right? And this is basic dawah. You say that we believe in La ilaha illallah and we pray salah and we give the charity, poor due. So he responded, this man, Shurayh, responded by saying that what was said was good, but that he could not decide without consulting his leaders. He added that he may soon accept Islam and bring them along with him. He then left. Before his arrival, the Holy Prophet ﷺ had already informed the companion Sahaba radiallahu anhum that a person shall shortly present himself who speaks with the tongue of the devil, shaitan. When he left, the Holy Prophet ﷺ told the companions, the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, he entered with the face of a disbeliever, a kafir, and he left with the feet of a deceiver. That means this man is a deceiver. So as he left Medina, this man, Shurayh, he stole all the camels grazing on the outskirts of Medina. And the companions, Sahaba radiallahu anhum, could not catch him despite their efforts. When the Holy Prophet ﷺ performed the lapsed Umrah, the Qadha, he heard, that means when he went back the next year, he heard the talbiyah of the people of Yamama. He exclaimed, "This is Hutum and his companions." And Hutum was the title of this man, Shurayh. With them were the camels that they had stolen. They had garlanded these camels so that they may be sacrificed at the Kaaba. So look at the cheek of that. They had taken the camels the year before, but now they had brought them back with garlands so that they could sacrifice them at the Kaaba. They also carried much trading stock with them. The companions, Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala, requested permission from the Holy Prophet ﷺ to attack them. So obviously the Sahaba, they were upset and they were angry that these people had taken they've taken our camels, so now we can take revenge. And so in Islam that we have an eye for an eye, we can't take revenge. So that law exists for us. And so the Prophet they wanted to do that, so they asked for permission. But the Prophet ﷺ refused permission on account of the garlanded animals. Because they were garlanded, he knew that those were meant for sacrifice. So the companions, Sahaba, protested that this was a practice of the period of ignorance and it should not be an obstacle for them. The Holy Prophet ﷺ still refused, and then the above verse was revealed prohibiting the violation of sacred symbols. That means when it's a sacred symbol, then we cannot violate it. So you can see the context of that verse when Allah is saying that do not violate sacred symbols. And we can see in this story as well, there's so many different things that we can learn from this story. Look at what the Prophet ﷺ had to put up with and how people are so deceptive and how they can play tricks. And this story came to us to illustrate a main point, which is that if it is a law of Allah, then we cannot violate it. No matter how we feel about it, or no matter what logic comes into our mind. But if it's a law of Allah, we cannot use our reasoning and our logic, but we have to go with the law that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has presented. Like a lot of people will argue today about slavery, and they say, that's outdated, that we don't have the Sharia, so we don't have slavery in Islam anymore, but why do the laws still exist? Right? So there should be billah, an abolition of these laws. But how can we comment on something which is, our vision is we have very short vision, because we're only seeing the here and the now. We can't see the fullness of time. We can't see the fullness of space, which Allah can see. And it is in the light of this that Allah gives us these laws. So just as the example that we use about slavery, so people will say, oh, slavery doesn't exist anymore. Who said it doesn't exist anymore? It is well and alive in all these Western countries. Everywhere in the world it's well and alive. And human trafficking is on the rise. Human trafficking, which is slavery, basically, is on the rise. So we can't say that it doesn't exist, and therefore we shouldn't have these rules. Or we have a better understanding with the COVID-19 about food, that what can food do to us, that when we go to food which are prohibited, which are alien to even to our tastes, right, or which are alien to our purity, then look what happens. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals these laws in their totality, and they go across vast expanses of time and human nature. And we may not understand them because we're looking at it from a certain level, but that doesn't mean we should contest or try to argue with these laws. And this story illustrates that for us very, very clearly. Right. So one of the first things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us in this verse is that we should fulfill our pledges. And in this commentary is Sayyidina Zayd ibn Aslam mentions the 5 type of pledges there are. So the first one is marriage, the second one is partnership, as in a business, and third is in oaths and vows that we take, whether they are for Allah, that I vow I will do something if something happens, that's an oath that you took with Allah, or you took it with the people, or a half, which means that 2 people agree to assist each other in certain matters. So that's a partnership that they come into, right? Like countries can come into this partnership, or they can, they can sign an accord where everybody agrees that, okay, to bring down pollution, we're all going to do this. We're going to cut back on the plastic, or we're going to cut back on this. So this is an agreement that 2 people come into, or 2 groups of people come into. And then the 5th one is promises, the promises that we make. So these are the 5 types of pledges, and we have been told in this is a law from Allah, that once you make that, then you have to fulfill that promise, and if you break it, then there will be an expiation for it. That means there'll be a kafara for it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made 4-legged animals halal for us. So in this verse, an'am is commonly refers to these animals, camels, cattle, goats, sheep, etc. And then those that resemble them, which are non-carnivorous. That means those animals don't eat other animals. So they have to be non-carnivorous, such as deer, buffaloes, buck, ostriches. These are the types of animals that we are allowed to eat, right? And that excludes carnivorous animals and wild beasts, right? And then it's also there's another verse which talks about forbidden for you is carrion, blood, the flesh of swine, and this will come in Surah An'am, and it was mentioned in Baqarah as well, that blood, carrion is dead meat. So we're going to try to make this really simple, because there's lots of very elaborate laws here. But dead meat, so we're not allowed to eat dead meat, meaning if the animal died of its natural causes, or it was killed in a manner which is not according to our dhabiha methods, like it was killed in an accident, or it died, it was hit by a truck, or it was hit by a blunt instrument, or another animal gored it, then that will be called carrion. So those type of animals we are not allowed to eat. And then we're not allowed to have the blood. So when we're not allowed to drink the blood, like many cultures, when they sacrifice the animal, they take the fresh blood and they drink it. We are not allowed to drink blood. Though, if the blood is on the meat and you were to cook it, that is okay. But if it drips off, right, the law is if the blood drips off the meat, then we're not allowed to have that. And the reason for that, and this is why our dhabiha methods are so clean. And remember that the Christians and the Jews also used to use the same method, and they would sacrifice with the name of Allah. They would say in the name of God, and then they would sacrifice. And when you cut the jugular vein, there's a certain way that is cut, then we allow the blood to flow out of the body. And that's why our method sometimes, and this is the argument for it, that it's so inhumane and it looks gory because all the blood is pouring out. We should use more humane methods. This is what the lobby, vegetarian lobby, etc., they will use these arguments that if the animal is stunned or is shot, then it doesn't feel the pain. This is all nonsense. When you do the research, when you go deep into it, you'll see that the most humane method to use is the dhabiha method, where the jugular vein is cut, and it's cut from one side, very sharp knife, and Bismillah is read, that the animal dies instantly. It does not suffer, and the blood is allowed to flow out. And the blood flowing out is important because the blood contains the diseases. And we know that because how do we detect diseases in human beings? What do? We go for a blood test. So the blood, it carries the diseases around the body. So when this blood is flown out of the animal, then we will have a cleaner meat, inshallah. And the third one here that is forbidden, absolutely forbidden, is the flesh of swine. And the flesh of swine is one of the dirtiest meats that you can eat. And not only is it physically dirty, if you look at it with a microscope, they see they do these tests because swine are actually the cleaners of the farm. If you look at the makeup of the farm, you'll see that they keep the swine on the outer levels. Why? Because the swine goes out and cleans everything. It eats everything, right? And it doesn't have no discrimination in what it eats. It will even eat its own children. So it's one of the dirtiest animals, and it's like the vacuum cleaner of the farm, because it just goes and eats all the debris, and it eats feces, it eats everything. And that's why if you look at the pork, you'll see that sometimes it even has worms in it. So it's one of the dirtiest meats physically, but also we've been told that that meat creates immodesty in people. The people that eat it, it takes away the haya, right? So we know that even foods that we eat have affect us on such a deep psychological level. So this is why the purity of food, the purest of foods, is so important, that we find the purest of foods and we get used to eating the purest of foods. Right, so these are the three that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden. And the game is unlawful to you when you are in the state of ihram. That was mentioned in this verse too. Now we know that in the state of ihram, we go into a state of purity where we don't do the things that we normally do in our life. So if you've been for Hajj, for example, you'll know that you stop using perfume soap. Many people stop using toothpaste, but there's lots of laws of the dress and what you can kill. Like even if there's a mosquito, you're not allowed to harm animals, for example. So there's lots of intricate laws of going into the state of ihram, and one of the laws is that you're not allowed to kill game at that time because your focus is on Allah. Right. So we can why are the laws important? Let's just have a quick look at that. We see that many of us, when we looking at laws, and they come down to us when we practice Islam, you'll see that it comes down into your dietary laws of what you can and cannot eat. So the law is in the Qur'an, but then it's translated, and with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, it'll come down as to the types of food that you can eat, what's halal and what is haram. And if we look in the totality of the foods, you'll see that what is haram is actually very little. It's not like 90% is halal, is haram, and only 10% is halal. It's more likely that we're saying that more than 90% is halal food. So we have a vast variety to choose from, and a very small minority which Allah has made haram. And we can relate this back to Adam alayhi salam too, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the whole Jannah food halal for them. But He just said, don't eat from this one tree. So Allah has put in this world forbidden trees for us too, which is the haram food, that we should not go near the haram, right? Because these are our forbidden trees, and we should look at them as the forbidden trees. And there's an advice that is given, and it's really kind of profound when you think about it, that don't commit a sin for a small gain, for a small pleasure. Because when you commit a sin, it's not going to take necessarily like a long time. You can commit a sin in a few minutes, like when if you talk about somebody, few conversations and you're done, right? You did the ghiba, and few things, few words, and it's done. Or it can take a few hours. You watch something that you weren't supposed to watch. Yeah, your eyes did haram, your ears did haram, and it says that that pleasure of it, that sin, will last for a few minutes or a few hours, and is gone. Then it's finished. But the pleasure will be gone, but the sin will remain with you, perhaps forever. You will walk with that sin through your life, subhanallah. If you don't do the tawbah and Allah doesn't forgive you, then you will walk through your life with that sin, and you will go into the grave with that sin, and you will rise on in hashr with that sin on the day of judgment, subhanallah, right? And maybe that sin, na'udhu billah, will lead into Jahannam too. So that is why, don't think a sin is very small and I did it and it's insignificant. Oh, I just said those words, or I just ate that food, or I just watched that thing, and we think nothing of it. No, we should think that it is big, because once you do it, it's on your record and you walk with it. There's something to think about. And the second advice that is given is, don't leave a good deed for a small hardship. So supposing you were praying and then you said, oh, I'm so tired now, I can't read these two nafil, I'm just going to leave them. Or I can't read my sunnah today because I'm so tired. But if you make your mind up and you say, no, this nafil or this sunnah is going to come with me into, it's going to go on, into my record. I'm going to walk with it, right? It's my good deed that I'm going to walk with eternally, and this is what I will walk into Jannah with. Then instantly you'll see where the energy will come from. You'll stand up and you'll read it, right? Or you don't want to give that last bit of charity. You're like, oh, this is so hard. Maybe I should keep this. I can give my kids ice cream with this. Yeah, I'll take them all out for ice cream, the last $20. But it's so hard to give it. But there's somebody asking right in front of you. So then you say, no, if I give this right now, then this $20 is going to become eternal. I have just swapped it out for an eternal ticket, and it's going to walk with me forever. So it's very powerful to think the way that you think, the way your mind thinks, and you don't fall for the shaitan's deceptions, but you think in an eternal level. You think with eternity, that this deed could be my ticket to Jannah, right? This woman could make such du'as for me, the one who's asking for this money, I give it to her, and just because of that, right? I forsake my children's ice cream, but that my children could become waliullahs because of this woman's du'as. She could give me such du'as that their destiny could change. Subhanallah. So the two advices that are given is, don't commit a sin for a small gain, because you will walk with it forever. And don't leave a small deed for a small hardship, right? It was hard to do wudu that day, but you said, no, let me do the wudu and let me read my Quran, because my Quran is going to be there forever. So push yourself to do the good deeds, because they are eternal, and always think these are for eternity. And this is very good advice when we're following the laws of Allah too. Right. And the next verse 3 says, forbidden for you is carrion, blood, and the flesh of swine, which we just did. Those animals slaughtered in the name of any other besides Allah. That means those animals which are slaughtered at the altar of other gods, billah, or even if they are slaughtered at when Muslims even go to the graves and they do shirk there, and they slaughter animals over there. So those animals which are slaughtered in the name of other people besides Allah, we're not allowed to eat that meat. Those that are strangled to death, so those animals which are strangled to death, maybe in an accident or by another animal, those that were beaten to death, those that fell to their deaths, those that were killed by a collision, and those eaten by wild beasts, and they left the rest of it, except that which you slaughter, right? Forbidden for you are all of these, what has been slaughtered at the altars, and distribution of the arrows. So distribution of the arrows is that if they used to do this in the olden days, that we would put the meat, 10 people would come and take a share of the meat, and then what they would do is they would draw out the lots, and 7 people would draw the lots. So actually all 10 of them would draw the lots, but only on 7 was written a share of the meat. So basically 3 people would not get the meat. So 7 people would get the meat and 3 wouldn't. And it was like a game. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, don't make it into a game. And this day the disbelievers have lost hope of your religion. So do not fear them, but fear me. This day have I perfected for you your religion, deen, completed my bounty upon you, and chosen Islam as your religion, deen. So whoever is constrained in starvation, not inclined towards sin, then indeed Allah is most forgiving, most merciful. Now this verse is, can you see how these verses have come together? There's a whole different topic here. And this verse is a very famous verse, which Prophet ﷺ was given when he did the Hajj. The Prophet ﷺ only did one Hajj in his lifetime. And when he was giving the farewell, it's called the farewell Hajj. So when the Prophet ﷺ was giving this sermon, this verse came down and it said, atmamtu alaykum ni'mati wa raditu lakum al-islam dina. That we have perfected for you your religion. We have completed it, and we have completed our favor upon you, because this religion was a favor upon us. Wa raditu lakum al-islam dina. And we have um, chosen Islam as your religion. So we have chosen this deen, Islam, as your religion. And so this verse came to tell us that our laws were now complete. Subhanallah. So this is a very important verse which tells us that Allah has given us all of our laws now. They are in the Qur'an and we've completed it. So this tells us that our religion is complete. Now if we have a dilemma, a modern dilemma, what we will do is we will go back to the Qur'an and the Sunnah. And you might say that, well, what if that what if that is not featured in the Quran and the Sunnah? Like for example, our media age, or our laws about the computers, for example, or a law about reading the Quran on the on the phones, for example. What are these laws? How are we going to relate these laws? So what we do is we go back, we take the modern dilemma that we have, and we go back to the Quran and the Sunnah, and we look for the mithal in it, we look for the examples in it, and the fuqaha, and usually this is the job of the muftis, that they will sit down and look at all the verses and the hadith related to it, and then they will come out with a fatwa. That means they will give a ruling. Fatwa means a ruling. They will give a ruling based on the Quran and the Sunnah. But in this verse, we are being told that we have completed all the laws. And this verse is in Surah Maidah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that we've completed the laws for you. So it means our laws are complete. What is halal and haram, Allah has made it complete for us already. We don't need to look in other places for it. And Allah says, we have completed the bounty for you as well. And then in the same breath it said, so whoever is constrained in starvation. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that if you are led to starvation and you can't find the halal meat, you can't find the halal food, then and you're not inclined towards sin, you don't want to eat it because you're trying to sin by eating that food. But so then it says that you can eat a little bit, as much as you need. And we know that when human beings are pushed to the limit, like there is no food, And you'll know the case of this happened. This is a true story. It happened a few years ago when there was a, a flight that the plane came down and most of the people were killed, and there were some people who survived. There were survivors in this plane crash, and in the end what they started doing was they started eating the flesh of, they were so hungry and they had to keep alive, they wanted to stay alive, they were driven by that, and they ate the flesh of those people who had died. Subhanallah. So when people are pushed to the limits, human beings can do all kinds of things. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the laws of what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. Right? And just about the laws Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran. So Islam encompasses the entire life of the man. So all our laws, like a lot of people will argue, many people they will argue that, oh, the Quran is an old book. For our modern laws, we need to look at modern law. We need to go and look at the modern laws that man has made. But you'll see that even in modern laws, and especially in modern laws, there's so many reforms. We keep changing our laws. Oh, this isn't working, we'll have to do this. Like recently, for example, you might have heard this happened in Ramadan, that there was a mass shooting in Canada, and then uh, so many people died. And this has been a recent thing in our times, that there's mass shootings. A crazy person will come with a gun and shoot down 20, 30, 40 people in one shot, right? So this happened in Canada recently, and this is happened this Ramadan. And then a week later, the prime minister came on and he said that we are banning these types of guns which can kill, which are made for mass killings. So they banned those kind of guns, but it took so many cycles of people dying for them to come to that realization. And in America, it's still a debate. Gun laws are still a big debate. But you can see that when humans make laws, we have to keep reforming them, and we keep going back and forth, because they might be suitable for a time and a people, but then we come back and we have to go and change them. So there are lots of reformations, whereas Allah's law is constant, and Allah's law encompasses uh, man's personal, social, political, economic, and every aspect of our life. So if we want the law, we will go to the Islamic law, the Sharia, and look at it. And like we mentioned yesterday, that there's so much rahmah, there's so much mercy behind these laws. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has even taught us through our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam how to behave with the family, with the friends, with the spouse, with the children, with the neighbors, with the guests, even our enemies. Like yesterday in Surah Nisa, there was even laws of how we should behave with the enemies. And there's detailed laws of peace and war, detailed laws of dressing and etiquettes of eating. So it's all been laid out for us in the Quran. And sometimes this is one of Imam Rumi's stories, that this Nasruddin, as you know, you may have heard of. He was a person who many people find his stories comical. We don't really know there's many legends of who he was. We don't really know who he was, if he was a fictional figure, or if he actually existed. But his stories have come down to us, and they are teaching stories. And one of the stories that he is related is that one day Mullah Nasruddin went outside, and he was in the marketplace, and he got down and he started searching for something. He was on his hands and feet and he's looking around. And some people came up to him and they said, "What are you doing?" So he's saying, "I'm looking for my watch. I lost my watch." So they asked him, he said, "Where did you lose it?" So he said, "I lost it in my house." So they said, "Why are you looking for it here?" So he said, "There's more light over here." Right? So you can see in this story that, look at the contradictions, that he'd lost his watch in his house, but he was looking in the marketplace, and his reasoning was that, "I'm looking because there's more light over here." So this is a teaching story. It teaches us, one thing that it teaches us is that we sometimes go in other places to look for guidance. Yeah, we might go on YouTube. We love to use Sheikh Google, and or we'll go on, look at other people how they're doing it. Yeah, we look at other communities, like we talked about the modern influencers. We look at them, or we look at superstars, and we look at what's available. We look at these kind of role models. But really, what we're doing, we're going into darkness, because we're not going to find any light over there. We think there's light there because it's available to us, right? It's apparent to us. So we think there's light, and we try to go there to look for things. But Allah is telling us the light is all here in the Quran. When you want to look for something, come into the Quran and look for it. And the Quran is accessible to everybody. Even if you don't understand Arabic, you can go to the index, go to the back, and look up that word food. And then there'll be so many verses, food, 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 in this surah, this surah, this surah. Go and look at those verses and just read the verse. Read the verse and try to understand it. And if you don't understand it, because sometimes if the language is difficult, then go and ask a scholar, or go to where it's pointing you that you can learn more about this here, and go and learn about it. That's how you can learn about it. It's an easy method I'm showing you that you can learn about it. Or go into the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, or go into the books that you have from your cultures, like the scholars in your cultures, the authentic scholars will have written books in your language that you can read, which are about the laws of Islam. So go and read those, and read it so that you can understand the laws and why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you to do them. Now, another point also is, when it comes to modern children, and the laws that maybe was came down to the older generation, we were very it was easy to accept them. We didn't question it, right? Your parents and grandparents, they didn't question law. If it was told to them Allah has said this, and they took it, right? They took it and they kissed it and they said, no, we will follow this. Even if a doctor, doctors had so much authority. Even if a doctor said something, they would take it. But we living in an age where we question everything. Our children question everything. And so the reasoning now, and to explain it now, has become more important, that we have to explain to them why we have these laws and why we need to follow these laws. So now you can see that we need another level of knowledge. Is the knowledge, just knowing the hukam isn't enough. We have to know why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us these things. And sometimes we find the answers and sometimes we don't. So this is just a sampler from Surah Maidah. There's so much more. There's so many more laws that it goes into. Another thing, after the detailed law, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that we have permitted halal food for you and tayyib food, right? The word that is used is tayyib. So we're going to look at that as well. Now, another law that is in here in this surah, after you read about um, the the food, is the law of the ablution, wudu. So the wudu laws come in here too. Now you might say, who taught us how to do wudu, and how do we know how to do the proper wudu? Well, it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He taught us in the Quran. And I'll read the verse to you. It says, "O you who believe, when you stand up to perform salah, wash your faces, your arms up to the elbows, pass wet hands over your heads." That means do the masa, and wash your feet up to your ankles. If you are impure, then purify yourselves well. If you are ill or on a journey returning from the toilet or from touching your women and you do not find any water, then use clean soil to wipe your faces and arms therewith. Right? So this is talking about the tayammum, that if you're in a circumstances where you can't use water, you don't have water, then you would use the soil to do the tayammum. Allah does not want to place any difficulty upon you, but wants to purify you and complete His bounty upon you, so that you may be grateful. Right? So this is the verse Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that why did we give you so many laws? So that we can complete our bounty upon you, and so that we can purify you. So we can see that all of these laws will help us to reach purity. Now this surah, as we mentioned, is Surah Maidah, which is which is the story of the table spread. Table spread means dastarkhan. This is a Farsi word which means something you spread on the ground to eat. And what was the Prophet ﷺ dastarkhan like? The Prophet ﷺ never ate at a table. His dastarkhan was a leather cloth that he would put down, and they would put the food on there and they would eat. If you come from South Asian cultures or even Arab cultures, African cultures, you'll be very familiar with this method of eating, that we put the food, this dastarkhan down, tablecloth down, and then we put the food down, and then we eat like this. And this, Prophet ﷺ say, was said that I eat like a servant eats, right? Because this creates humility. You eating on the floor with the food on the floor, and you're eating in a crouched manner, and this is the humility that comes into the person, right? You're not eating in an upright manner or leaning on the chair, and you've got all your fine cutlery around you and glasses around you and eating like that. That's not the way a Muslim eats. The believer eats in a certain way, because when, remember what we said about when you come into Islam, you submit. So you submit to everything the Prophet ﷺ has given us to as well, and that submission comes when we submit to the Sunnah, that we submit to the way the Prophet ﷺ taught us to eat. So just quickly going to this story, um, this is when the Hawariyin, and this is 111 verse of Surah Al-Ma'idah. It says, when I inspired the disciples Hawariyin with the instruction to believe in me and in my messenger. The Hawariyin were the helpers of Isa alayhi salam. So they were the his helpers. In Christianity call them the disciples. They said, we believe, and you be witness that indeed we have surrendered. So they said, we believe and we have surrendered to God. When the disciples, Hawariyin, said, O Isa, son of Maryam, is your Lord able to descend on us a table spread with food from the skies? So they were asking, they said, can you ask him to send us from the sky a table spread? We want a whole dastarkhan to come down, which is filled with food, and we want to see it coming down, right? This is what they were asking for. And remember, these are the believers, they're not even the disbelievers. So Isa alayhi salam replied, fear Allah if you are indeed believers. I mean, why are you asking for such a thing? Yeah, you already believe in Allah. Why would you need to see this? Why are you asking for miracles? They said, we wish to eat from it, satisfy our hearts, know that you have been truthful to us, and be witnesses thereto. So they said, we have several reasons. One is that we literally want to eat from the food of the heavens. Yeah, we want to taste it. And the second is that we want to satisfy our heart. That means we believe in you. Obviously, we believe in you, but we also want to see it with our eyes so that our hearts become more tranquil, more satisfied. And we want to know that you have been truthful to us, and we want to be a witness to this, right? We want to witness it so that we can tell other people as well. So Isa, the son of Maryam, submitted. So he made this dua. Isa alayhi salam makes this dua. And Isa alayhi salam, as you know, was a very gentle soul, right? If you read his history, you'll see that this is why the people used to come and make all these demands of him. And that's why their Sharia also, this is reflected in their Sharia too, that their Sharia was a lenient Sharia. It was a softer Sharia than ours is. The Jews' Sharia, their laws were more stricter than ours. And that's why Prophet ﷺ said that we are in the middle. Our Sharia, our laws are in the middle. We are Ummatul Wasata. We are in the middle. Our laws are not too strict. Like the Jewish laws, you'll see they had certain places where they could pray. They couldn't pray everywhere. And there are certain things that they had to keep, like the Sabbath. Even today, the practicing Jews, you'll know, is very, very strict. They can't cook on that day, right? But what have they done to get around that? They've invented ovens which you can time. They called kosher ovens, where you can put the timing on the day before and put your food in, and then it will cook it on that day. So they'll say that, oh, we didn't cook this food today, right? So they got around so many of their laws like this. But the Isa'i Sharia is a very lenient one, and you'll know the famous adage that comes from there. It says, if somebody slaps you on one cheek, then you present the other. Yeah, you present the other. You say, here, take this one too, and slap me on here. So that there was a lot of forgiveness and rahmah in Isa alayhi salam. And so Isa alayhi salam prayed and he submitted this dua. He said, "O Allah, our Lord, send down to us a table spread with food from the heavens, and that it may be a feast for us. It may be a feast for those of us present here and for those of us still to come, and a sign from you. Grant us sustenance, for you are the best of sustainers." So Allah said, Verily I will send it to you. Whoever of you shows ingratitude after this, I will surely punish him with a punishment therewith I will never punish anyone in the universe. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did send a table spread with food from the heavens for them. Right? And the description is in the hadith of what actually came down on the table spread, but he sent that. And that's why this surah is called Surah Maidah, which means the tablecloth. Now, I wanted to talk to you um, about food today, our modern food, relating it to our modern food. And when I was thinking about this, I said, this topic is so vast, right? It's so wide that just to find an inroads in it is difficult because there's so many things to talk about. But just we will talk about it briefly here, but I would like later on that we have these discussions and these discourses go into our families and into our communities. And this discussion, as we have seen from what the lockdown and what's happening right now, that these discussions are going to become even more important about the halal and the tayyib food. Tayyib means a pure food. So yes, we are eating the halal, but are we eating the tayyib? Are we eating the purest of the foods? And most of the time we'll say that no, we're not eating the tayyib. So we need to really have discussions around this type of food. And like an example is right now, if I know that the surveys have not been done yet, they're inconclusive because we're still going through this COVID-19. But one of the biggest things that we're finding is who wins in this race. Who are the people? What's the difference between the people that die and the people that recover? So, one of the biggest factors is that the people with the strongest immune systems are the ones who survive. And that's why we've been told that keep your immune system very strong. During this time, take the vitamin C, take the A and the D, eat the healthy foods, take some exercise, make sure you get fresh air. These are the advices we're being given so that we can keep our immune system very strong. The immune system is basically a defense system, right? It's a mudafi'a system inside you, which Allah has made, which wards off all the sicknesses. So, um, as when we start going into this, there's so many avenues, and there's so much literature out there, and there's so many books out there, but we can make very small but very profound changes. And one of the things we can change, and I'm just going to talk about one of them, is the sugar. And because we all know about sugar, right? So I don't have to go very deeply into this. We know that um, it affects us on a cellular level. It causes diabetes, obesity, and it affects concentration in children. There's so many studies that have been done on this. And I wanted to share a story about this, that where did the sugar actually come from? Now, if you look at sugar, if you look at it in its original form, where it came from, it came from, sugar is made from the sugar cane, right? They grow the sugar cane, so it's a natural plant. So when we eat it in that form, when it's taken in that form, in the sugar, like say sugar cane juice, or you eat the sugar cane itself, then it doesn't have the harm that the filtered sugar has. Subhanallah. So when they filter it and they process it, it becomes something else, and it acts in a different way inside the body. So um, sugarcane mills were actually, if you look at the history of them, they were started in India, the first ones. This is a product of the colonization, as with many other things. They were started in India, and what they did is they gave free sugar at very cheap prices to the Indians, and they got them addicted to it. And the two things that they got them addicted to: the sugar and the caffeine, tea. And when these people got addicted, you'll see that there is a very high incidence of type 2 diabetes in these countries where this sugar is taken. Anyway, a story is told about from one of the sugar mills. You'll know when they process sugar, and they have to extract all the juice. So there's a lot of water, sugar water, that is left. So the tanks get filled up. So one time, what they did in one of these sugar mills, they took that water and they went and dumped it in one of the fields. And at night, when when nobody was around. So that was done. Now that year, that farmer found that nothing was growing in that field. This field had been so good, and he'd done the crop rotation, and he'd followed all the rules, but nothing was growing. So he had an earth analysis done. And when they did the analysis, they said there's so much sugar inside this soil. Where did this sugar come from? So they knew that there was a sugar mill nearby, and they did an investigation, and they found that the sugar had been dumped in there. It really had been dumped. Now, what the farmer said, he went to court and he said, and this is what had happened in his field, is that his soil became depleted, nothing grew in it, and whatever had been there was dead inside. It became a dead load. And this is what sugar does inside our bodies. So he did a court case, and obviously he won and all of that. But the point is that the sugar becomes a load inside our body, and it's a food which is not in its natural state. So the rule with food is, when we take the food out of its natural state, then we're going to have problems with it. If we make it into something else, we process it and we make it into something else. And quickly, I'll give you another example of the French fries. And this is a man called Michael Pollan. He talks about this. He's a writer, and he's talking about McDonald's French fries. And he says that there was the French fries. They are made from a certain type of a potato, because you'll see wherever you go in the world, you get a similar type of a French fry, and that's the you could say that is the appeal of McDonald's. That anywhere in the world you go, you get a similar type of food. You know what you're going to get, and that's why these franchises just took off. But they came at a cost. So this potato is a russet Burbank potato, it's called, and it's quite long, and it's quite difficult to grow as well. But the farmers in Idaho are growing this kind of potato. Now the problem with this potato is that, and when McDonald's buys it, they don't want any flaws on it. That's why you'll see that none of your chips have any flaws. They don't have any spots or brown dots, nothing. So in order to counteract that, what they do is that they spray a pesticide on it, which is called Monitor. And this pesticide, when they spray on the potato, the farmers will not go out into the fields for 5 days after they've sprayed it, because this pesticide, this chemical, is so poisonous, right? It's so poisonous. And if you look into the history of the modern history of farmers, you'll see that so many have gotten cancers. And they've made documentaries on this. They've documented all of this evidence that they had cancers because of these kind of pesticides. Anyway, for 5 days, they don't go. And then after the potato is harvested, they keep it in controlled sheds, right? In atmosphere controlled sheds, which are as huge as stadiums, right? They're really big. And these potatoes are kept for 6 weeks in there. They're not edible. Why? Because this potato has to offload all the chemicals that were inside. Right? So imagine this is your favorite McDonald's French fries, and which we feed our kids, and we like, this is your treat. This is what we're giving them. And so for 6 weeks, these potatoes will offload all the chemicals, and who knows how much still remains inside. And then this comes, which is as the French fry, which is put into these cute little red boxes, and you'll see they're long fries, and they come out like a bouquet, and we're like, oh, there's nothing like a McDonald's French fry. But look at the history of that potato. So we learn that nutrition, there's very little that people know about it, number one. Number two, commercial food, wherever it is, when it's made by a commercial, like companies, it's going to be very harmful for you. And we already know that, because the three ingredients that they use, salt, fat, and sugar, these are very cheap and they are attractive. Because when you layer these three together, the salt, the fat, and the sugar, the foods become addictive. Now, the industry won't say these are addictive food, but they use words like craveability. You can crave these foods. You can continue to eat them. Once you pop, you can't stop. right? Or they have snackability. And look at the slogans they use as well. So you can see that commercial food now has become our death. We can even say that, right? It's like the new smoking, more than smoking, because these foods are leading us to our death. So we need a lot of education on our modern foods. So on the one hand, we have our laws from the Quran, which are very specific about what type of food we can eat, and on the other hand, we have the modern food, and we have to go through this maze of the deceptions, because it's all about money at the end of the day, and it's making us sick, and we have to learn about these foods, and we have to select the purest of purest foods that we can find, bring it into our home, and only eat those foods. So, inshallah, we're going to end here, and we're going to take a break tomorrow, and um, inshallah we'll come back on Thursday, and we still have a few minutes. I'm just going to say about the food that what you can do on a practical level is start researching where your food comes from. So follow the chain of the food. That means go back to where your food, where it's made, how it's made. And a lot of people will say, oh, this is too much effort, this is too much effort, we just want to go to the store and pick up a bag of chips, for example, and bring it home and eat them. But it's not as simple as that, because the that simplicity will cost you. That simplicity is going to cost your body, because once it goes inside your body, that oil that the chips were made with are going to have a different effect. Right? The potatoes that it was made with are going to have a different effect. The seasoning and the chemicals that were used to keep it on the shelf for so long, they're going to have a different effect in the body. And this is where are so many of our modern illnesses are coming from. You'll see that in the medical community, we're reluctant to talk about food when it comes to diseases. We always talk about medicine. Yeah, this is the medicine that we can take. But what about the food? Because the cause of it was the food, right? Most probably it was the food and the stressful factors, the stress that we're living in our lives. These are the causes, the main causes of the diseases that we have today. So there needs to be a lot of discussion about this. Islam is a very modern religion. Trust me. The Quran is very, very modern. Yeah. It might look like it's an ancient book and we don't understand it, came from there and the language is like this, but it's too modern. You can go in there and you can find everything you need to find. So assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And make dua for the whole ummah, inshallah. People who are sick, people are dying from this disease. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for Muslims, we believe they are martyrs, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them a beautiful place in Jannah. Those people who are sick, may Allah help them to recover. Those families who are suffering, Allah ease their suffering. Whatever the suffering is, Allah ease their suffering in the world. And generally, all the ummah, everybody who is suffering, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease everybody's suffering. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.